Meet them for the last time, he said, but he didn't hear any response from her. He looked at her and found her staring straight, blankly. He squeezed her waist slightly and she winced in pain. She looked at him but shuddered, seeing his dark orbs staring at her. She immediately lowered her gaze. Meet your family for the last time, sweetheart, he said, his voice sending shivers down her spine. She looked at her family, step-family, who were smiling while attending the guest, but she knew the truth behind those smiley faces. Her stepmom slowly walked towards her and pulled her towards their family before hugging her and whispers in her ear, "He shouldn't know that you are not our real daughter. Otherwise, you know." She broke the hug and smiled at her, wiping her fake tears. Wyan just stared at them blankly. "It's time to leave. Take care of her, son. We have raised her with so much love. If she will do any mistake in future, please forgive her." Jungkook took Wyan's hand in his before looking at her. "Of course, I will take very well care of her. And now you don't have to worry for her, not when you have sold your daughter to me for saving your business," he said bitterly while Wyan closed her eyes as tears fell from her eyes, which she was trying to hold back from so long. He grabbed her hand tightly and walked out with her. She looked at her hand, which was tightly clasped in his hold. Another hell. He pushed her on the bed harshly while looked at his dark eyes. He was looking very angry. She slid back towards the headboard when she saw him climbing on the bed. But he grabbed her wrist and pulled her down, grabbing her both wrists in his one hand, and with the other he grabbed her jaw tightly, making her yelp in pain. She closed her eyes tightly. "Look at me." She flinched at his voice but didn't open her eyes. "I said look at me, Wyan," he said, pressing on each word, and his hold on her hands kept on getting tight. She slowly opened her eyes. Her teary eyes met his fierce ones, and he was taken aback for a second. He loosened his hold on her hands. "How good you are at acting, girl. For a second, I also mistook you as innocent. But no, you're not innocent." This innocent face had done many dirty and cruel works. "And look, your parents also sold you to me. They don't love you. Maybe they also got to know what kind of person you are. They must be ashamed for having a daughter like you." She looked at him as more tears flowed down from her eyes. "Do you know why you are here?" he asked, but she didn't say anything. "Don't make me repeat, Wyan. Tell me, why are you here?" She was still staring at him, unsure of what to say. "'Cause I'm your wife," he shouted loudly in the middle, causing her to flinch badly. "You're not my wife. You're just a maid here. Don't ever dare to think yourself as a queen just because you are married to me. You are here to pay for all your sins." He left her with a jerk and got up from her and started walking out of the room. But just as he reached the door, he heard her slow crying as if she was in so much pain. He looked at her over his shoulders and saw her rubbing her wrist as they have become red because of his tight hold, and he can clearly see his fingerprints on her wrists. He somehow felt guilty for losing control over himself, as his mother never taught him to treat a girl like this. But then he remembered what she had done to his loved one, his only family. This was nothing in front of what she had done. His hands turned into fists and he walked out of the room before he will lose control again, cause his plan was something else. Vine looked at the doorway, wiping her tears. She took some breath of relief as he didn't kill her tonight, or did something worse, like she assumed by the way he was looking at her in the whole wedding. Unne must have done something terrible to him. That's why he is behaving like this. She slightly winced in pain, causing Jungkook to hold his breath. But then she slept again, and Jungkook took a breath of relief. He put the ointment on the table. I was about to get caught. What the hell I am even doing? Treating her bruises in the middle of the night. Cause I was not able to sleep as her face covered in tears kept coming in front of me. Thinking about his absurd thoughts, he walked out of the room. Vine gasped and sat straight on the bed, wiping the water from her face. She looked up only to find Jungkook standing there with the empty bucket. "You're not here to sleep till afternoon. Get up and make my breakfast. And you will do all the work of the house. There is no maid, and I don't want a single mistake." Vine nodded and slowly got down from the bed before walking out. Jungkook looked at her disappearing figure, wondering why is she not talking back. As much as he knows about her personality, she is a witch, but he can't see that. Maybe she is acting, but till when? Soon you will be behind the bars. Just wait for the right moment, sweetheart. It's been a month since Vine is here, and her life with Jungkook is not as bad as she thought. She just have to do all the work of the house alone, but here is no one to taunt her like back then in her step family. Sometimes Jungkook said some hurtful words to her, but she don't understand what exactly her stepsister had done to him to make him this angry. But she never dared to open her mouth, as she always remembered her stepmother's word. Never dare to open your this shitty mouth in front of him. Otherwise, he is a mafia. He will kill you. He don't have mercy, and of course, we will not come to save you. She was already very scared of him, but to add into it, one day she saw him beating one of his men brutally, just because he lied. They were talking about some information and project. She don't know the whole matter, but she knows that the man lied to him. She shivered at the scene in front of her eyes. She was cursing herself for coming out of the room in the midnight to witness something like this. Vine, Vine. Vine flinched at the sudden sound and looked at her. "Sir is asking for coffee. Be quick. He wants it in 5 minutes. She said, and Vine nodded and started preparing coffee while Mia looked at her up and down and then left. She is the only maid present in the house, not to work, but to keep eyes on Vine. I'm sorry. Please, leave me," she said, trying to free her hand from his grip. She accidentally spilled coffee on his important documents, and now he has lost his mind, cause those papers were really important for his next deal. "You can't even do one work properly." His eyes were red in anger. He looked at those ruined documents and then looked at her. "You did this purposely, right?" he shouted, and she flinched badly and stepped back. She shook her head and tried to say something, but words just got stuck in her throat. Seeing him raging in anger, he strode towards her and grabbed her wrist tightly. You will pay for this. Saying this, he started dragging her somewhere. Don't worry, after staying locked in this dark room without food and water for a day, you will think several times before making mistakes. Ryan's body trembled, seeing the dark room. Please, I'm sorry. Please leave me this time. I swear I will not make any mistake. Please, don't lock me here. She pleaded, but he was beyond angry to hear her pleadings. He pushed her inside the dark room and locked the door. And suddenly, the mansion became quiet, as the room was soundproof, so her screams can't come out from the room. Now feel, how does it feel being locked in the dark room, just like you locked her? Don't know why, but Jungkook couldn't feel at ease after locking her in that dark storage room. He couldn't shake off the image of Vine's tear-stained and terrified face when he locked her in. But on the other hand, he thought he did right to lock her here, just like she did with his sister. Yes, his sister, who is right now in coma from 5 years because of constant bullying in the school she committed. She was saved, but unfortunately she fell in coma. And in all this, the main culprit was the daughter of Mr. Man. But because of his influence, she got out of it without any punishment. But now, he is here to give her punishment of her sins. But he doesn't know one thing. That Mr. and Mrs. Min had replaced Vine in the place of their lovely daughter. And because he had never seen her, he couldn't tell. And all the records were destroyed earlier. The only thing he knew, that only daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Min was the one who constantly bullied his sister. An hour passed and Jungkook couldn't bear it anymore, so he ordered the maid to open the door. And after a minute, he saw her running to her room and then closing it loudly. He heard her crying sound and felt an unknown ache in his chest. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Am I falling for my sister's tormentor? No, it can't happen. Maybe it's because I have never hurted any girl like this before. Now I'm only waiting for my sister to wake up and decide her punishment. Sir, Vine has fainted in her room. What? Jungkook stood up from his chair and ran to her room. As he entered her room, he saw her lying like a lifeless on the floor. He picked her up in his arms and laid her on the bed. Call the doctor, fast, he said while sprinkling some water on her face. She opened her eyes slowly, but within seconds, her eyes got closed again. After an hour, Vine gained consciousness. The doctor had already left after checking her and told him that she got fainted because of weakness and also took her blood sample for test. Vine slowly opened her eyes only to find Jungkook staring at her, causing her to flinch on her place. She winced in pain when she moved her hand. Jungkook held her hand, stopping her movements. Don't move, it is about to finish. Only then she noticed there was an IV drop attached to her hand. Why didn't you have anything from yesterday? She felt fear rushing to her whole body as he spoke in his cold voice. She tried to take her hand back, but he held it firmly. I asked something, Ryan. Cause you told me not to eat. You told me to stay without food, she said, and he stared at her in disbelief. Yes, he had said that, but he was angry at that time. and he even himself don't know what he might say in anger. So, if I'll say not to eat anything for a week, then you will starve for a week? She nodded silently without saying anything. He looked at her for a second and then scoffed. He stood up from the bed while his eyes was still fixed on her. Stop trying to play innocent here. Such a drama queen you are. Don't think I'll have pity on you and show mercy seeing your these acts. Oh my god, for a second I fell for your act. Get on the work from tomorrow and eat your dinner and medicine. Saying this, he walked out of the room, grabbing his hair. He walked in the house while shouting her name madly. His voice echoed in the whole mansion. Wine was in the kitchen, and as soon as she heard his voice, shivers ran down her spine. Cause from his voice, it was clear that he is very angry. Suddenly, the voice stopped, and it was dead silence. She looked up, and her breath hissed, seeing Jungkook standing there, his jaw clenched tightly, his eyes glaring at her with the intensity that could swallow her alive. He started walking towards her. She panicked. She thought it was an end. Her eyes filled with tears. She stepped back, but just in two strides, Jungkook was in front of her and his hand on her neck. Jungkook held her neck tightly, as if he was determined to knock the life out of her. Vian's eyes widened in horror. Her hands gripped his, desperately trying to get out of his grip, but his grip was unyielding. Who are you? He asked, but she was in no condition to answer. Her eyes rolled back, and just as she was about to lose consciousness, Jungkook let go of her throat and held her by her shoulders. Who are you? Why answer me before I do something reckless? I'm losing my mind. You are not the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Men. Then who are you? And why you deceived me? Answer me, Ryan. Answer me.